Hello, friend. Thank you for pressing play on this episode of the Brassy Broadcast. I'm Jen Edds, the head broad in charge at the Brassy Broadcasting Company, and joining me for episode 6 of our series on enlightenment in the modern world is our good friend, Amy Woodall.
Hey, Jen Edds.
Hey, Amy Woodall. Welcome back to episode 6. And in this episode, we are talking about course correcting crappy communication.
That was really good because that's a tongue twister.
Yeah, you and your crazy alliterations. So my question to you is, what should we keep in mind when communicating? What do we need to be mindful of?
Yeah, there's a real lack of communication knowledge that's planted within us from a young age. Mm-hmm. I wish they taught that in schools, that they would sit kids down and say, hey, here's how you become an effective communicator. And yet that's what ends up tripping up a lot of our relationships and our happiness and our stress later on in life is how we're dealing with communicating. And, as we kick this off saying we're not really all that great of communicators with ourselves. So that's really kind of what this series was about, is how do we become better internal communicators?
Yes.
But when we're communicating with someone else, I wrote a program for Sandler Corporate that's called Dealing with Difficult People. And the very first chapter of this course, we focused on identifying your own triggers. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I want to start for us today in this episode is how can you identify and sit down and really write out what are your triggers when you're communicating with someone else? What are your triggers that can cause it to go off course?
Okay.
That can cause it to get in, in one of the episodes you and I did, not in this series, but previously when you had me on, we talked about the Karpman's drama triangle.
Oh, I remember that.
Remember that?
Yes.
Where you can either be the victim or the persecutor or the rescuer. And just being mindful okay, when we get caught up, what causes us to get there? What seems to push the buttons? What's the triggers look like? And then what's our natural reaction? If we're not focusing on that first, we're kind of solving the wrong end of the problem, because first we have to take ownership over what things that we're allowing to disrupt the apple cart, essentially.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. What are the things that push your buttons? I'm curious. When you're communicating with somebody, is it somebody who's overbearing or pushy, or what is it that just kind of ruffles your feathers?
I don't like pushy. I'm not a fan of pushy.
Okay.
When I feel like I'm not being heard, that's a big one for me.
When being ignored?
Mm-hmm.
I have some of those triggers that happen in customer service, because that's really my role within the Sandler network, right? Is I teach customer care all over, everywhere. And for people who are sort of dismissive, right? Or when you don't have,
yes.
When I don't have control, that's one of my button pushers for sure.
Or people that make me feel stupid. I had a meltdown at the state fair one year in line at the dairy bar. Well, it was after the dairy bar, because the guy was like, well, you didn't have to stand in this line that was so long for what you needed. You could have gone to the other. I was like, it's not what I needed. Mm-hmm. I let him steal my joy at the dairy bar at the state fair.
Dang it. You'll have to go back and listen to the Harness Your Happiness, or Harnessing Happiness episode. I think it's the one right before this one.
It is. How convenient. Now I know how to get my joy back.
So, to your point, we all have those pieces of it. And somebody could be listening and saying, oh, well, that doesn't bother me when someone does this, but their triggers are something different. Mm-hmm. And just knowing them, write them down, be aware of them, because once we're aware of them, it's sort of like when we gave our ego a name. We decided the name should be Jerry, that if you kind of give your triggers a name and call them out, then you can see them more clearly when they come out in front of you. And what ends up happening if we don't do this is this idea that they kind of are pushing our buttons, and then we're in this game of ego states at play. And ego states, it's also commonly called transactional analysis. So forgive me, I'm going to go into some psychobabble here for a moment. But it's actually important when we're communicating to recognize this. So I'm going to take you guys on a journey. Imagine that when you were born, you were implanted with 3 cassette tapes.
Ooh.
So you get really excited.
Yeah.
And that record is hit on all 3 cassette tapes. And for the younger listeners, like 25 and under, just Google cassette tapes. Then you'll have an idea. I'm sure you know what they are. But let's pretend that record is hit on all of them. And the first cassette tape is called the parent tape. And the parent is recording the messages we heard from like mom and dad and the grownups around us. And there's really two versions of that tape, okay? Like side A, side B, right? Kicking it old school.
Yes, I love it.
And one version of that could be the nurturing parent, which is the one that just like, you feel safe, right? Like everything is going to be okay. It's not a big deal. We're all good. Mm-hmm. Then there's the critical parent ego state, which is the, why is your homework not done? You need to go get this. Where have you been all night? And it's sort of like, I'm pointing my finger at Jen right now. You could see she's having this visceral reaction, like, ugh. Sort of the shoulding on people, if you will.
Oh, yes.
Like shoulding and sort of like, you need to do this and that. And you see there's a very distinct difference in tone. Okay, I'll mention why this is so important in our communication as I get through these ego states. So the next tape that's recording is our child ego state. Mm-hmm. And what that's recording is how we respond to that parent and what emotions are evoked, when we're interacting with the parent. And so one of the versions of that could be the adaptive child. And the adaptive child is the one that when they're yelled at, they feel bad. Mm-hmm. And they feel guilty and they don't like to be in trouble and they feel like they want to just keep everybody else happy. And so when mom and dad say, you need to go do your homework, they're like, okay. Or they might cry if they get yelled at. Mm-hmm. There's that version of a kid. Yeah. There's also the rebellious child ego state, which is the one when mom and dad say, go do your homework. They'll say, I don't have to listen to what you say. I will do my homework when I want to. And they're the sassy talk back, do what I want, push back against authority kind of child, which that's the kind of kid I was.
I'm shocked.
I know, aren't you?
I was child A.
Were you? Well, you're a firstborn. Firstborns always want to follow the rules. And then there's the firstborn showed up. I told Jen, she doesn't really remind me of a firstborn, but that's where it shows up. And then there's the little professor ego state, which is the child who knows how to manipulate to get their way. They know how to say the right things. They know how to put a spin on it. I have one of my kiddos is really good at being like, oh, mom, you look so nice today. Or you're really pretty. Or, something that's just, let me butter her up so I can get my way. He's an expert at it. And I fall for it every time. And then there's the part of us, which many of us might have this side, which is the natural child. And that's the part of us that wants to have fun. So if you're ever like wanting to get liquored up and dance on tables, that's your natural child. Is that just me? No. That's your natural child coming out. Or making jokes or, just sort of coming in. So it's important to know what your reaction is. The third state is the adult ego state. And the adult ego state is just recording what's logical around us. And it's just recording facts. There's no emotions involved. Mm-hmm. So when mom and dad say, don't cross the road without looking both ways, the adult records that memory. And now it creates it as a new pattern. So why ego states are so important is because if we're not mindful, if we are not in the moment, then our buttons are going to get pushed, our triggers are going to get hit, and now we're in ego state mode. Okay, so if somebody comes at you, let's just say it's a colleague, because all of this stuff, comes to play in life, at home, at work, wherever you go. Let's say a colleague comes to you and says, you need to get me this by tomorrow. And they use this tone, the critical parent tone. They are pushing your child button. And so whatever your reaction was as a child is what it's going to come out as now if we're not mindful. Mm-hmm. So if you are the adaptive child, it's going to come out as one of feeling guilty and upset and sort of ruminating over it. Mm-hmm. You might be kind in the moment and say, okay, sorry, sorry about that. I'll get it to you tomorrow. Yeah. But it might stick with you and sort of the feelings of guilt and whatnot. Or if you're the rebellious child, you might say, excuse me, I don't know who you think you're talking to, and we might want to put them in their place. Now, this is actually based on a book that was written in the 1950s by a gentleman named Eric Berne. And it was called Games People Play.
Okay.
Right? And we're playing these games back and forth all the time. And the real disruption in communication happens when we are not mindful. We're letting our buttons get pushed. And then our automatic responses come up. That's where our ego states, they're automatic responses. We're not even thinking about it. It's just what's pre-wired within us because it's based on the messages we heard as a child. If you've ever heard your parents sort of coming out of your mouth,
Oh,
where,
God.
Where you're
Yes.
like, oh, holy crap, when did my mom get here?
Right.
You know, like for me, I'm a parent. I have 2 boys, and I'll say things like, why is the light still on in this room when no one is in here? Can no one turn this light off? And then I'm like, oh, hey, Dad. Hey, nice to see you. When did you show up here? And it's interesting, but it's based on the scripts that we heard.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, again, not to get it too much into like the psychology stuff, but it's important to consider what causes us to have disruption and get into a place of crappy communication. It's really that we're not being mindful, we're not in the moment, and our automatic responses have taken hold.
How do we form a better response?
Not to be like redundant in everything that we've talked about, but essentially it is mindfulness, right? Again, going back to have the triggers down, have an understanding, be aware of the emotional shifts. Something that meditation and mindfulness, practicing that consistently, having a dedicated practice, you will become more attuned to the shifts in your body. So offline here, you and I were having a conversation in your kitchen, and I was telling you about some of the foods I can no longer eat, you know, and how it kind of sucks because I can't have like things that are, you know, traditionally delicious because my body now has just a negative response to it. But I was never in tune to that before. I didn't recognize that was what caused the shift. You know, I would sort of put the blame on external things like, oh, well, I'm tired, not, you know, I feel like crap because I ate something that my body now has a shift to. So it's just, you become more attuned to the minor shifts that end up happening. You can start to see the trigger sort of coming.
Yes.
You can see, it almost happens in slow motion. Like, you know, I'm coming in to push your buttons, you know, and so then you can formulate a better response to that. You know, if you go and listen to interviews done by elite athletes, when they're in a flow state or in a highly mindful state, they can literally see things happening in slow motion, right? Like Peyton Manning, because we're in Indianapolis here, and you can't not love Peyton Manning if you're from Indianapolis.
Exactly.
Like that's just a part, comes with the territory. But they'll say that they see like the game slows down, where for the rest of us, it's happening in real life time and it happens so quickly, you might not even notice where the ball's going or what the play was. It starts to happen in slow motion. And that's the same response that we start to have when we become more mindful. It's like everything just slows down so that we can see the button pushing happening. Did you hear that? Button pushing. There's that's my little bit of the hillbilly coming out there. And then we are more mindful of the response. We can take a deep breath and be more mindful. So something else I don't think we've mentioned or I've mentioned yet, but there is science behind how meditation strengthens the vagus nerve. And it's not spelled Vegas like the place. Yeah, no, it's not spelled the same way, but it's the nerves that connect the brain to the heart. And when those become stronger and more strengthened, it increases your intuition and your empathy. Yo, that's been helpful because I don't know. I'm not like a naturally empathetic person.
Either am I.
And it doesn't make us bad people. It's just for some people, it's very natural. It's ingrained. And for other people, we have to stop and say, oh, let me consider the feelings of others. You know, let me sit and it makes you more attuned and more empathetic. And empathy is one of the things that can make us better when we're communicating. Empathy and the ability to own the situation.
Oh, let's talk more about that.
So I'm a big believer that we need to learn how to own our I just like self-beliefed a little bit.
That was really good. That was really impressive.
You know, I'm for hire if anybody needs me to, self-bleep. But owning that is this different level of the ability to shift the outcomes. And as I was in with a client last week, we were talking about when they're hiring people in a customer care position, and even if it's like somebody in engineering or, you know, there's project management, that it traditionally would have been we want someone with a high level of empathy, and now it's we want somebody with a high level of ownership and a secondary empathy.
Really?
Yes.
Why is the ownership piece first?
So I think it trumps the empathy because when we're owning it, we're not needing to assign blame. There's not the need to sort of say, okay, well, you did this. Now, do you hear the ego states coming out? You did this, and this is your fault. And going back to that Karpman's drama triangle of the victim and the persecutor, they'll play games all day long. But if we're in a role of rescuer, I actually like the term ownership better. If we're in an ownership state, then we can get out of the drama faster, rather than just playing the blame game back and forth and pointing the finger and, that could go on forever. But when there's ownership, it's like, okay, the situation is the situation. Let's just figure out together how we move forward and what are the next steps that we can take. It's really an adult frame of mind. So, accessing the adult ego state so that you can move forward. I'm telling you, ownership. And it feels good to be around people who know how to own stuff, who know how to say like, I made a mistake and I'm really sorry. People who know how to own up to mistakes and just, take it and run with it and fix it without needing to sort of be like, oh, but you did this because like it just just nicer to be in the, around folks who take that mentality.
I'm curious then, why is ownership valued more than empathy?
What most companies need now, so it's this interesting dynamic, and what's shifted in cultures is that people are trying to break down the silos that once existed, and that's become a hot topic in cultures. And in order for that to happen, there has to be this extreme ownership mentality. Ownership over the problem, ownership over fixing it, ownership in even saying, hey, if I literally owned the company, how would I act differently? And people behave differently when they have that level of responsibility on them. They don't play victim and persecutor, which just pass that blame back and forth all day long and don't necessarily come to the resolution. And then managers and leaders end up feeling like they're playing mom and dad. So the games that people play ensue, and having this idea of, hey, let's keep the emotional waste at bay. Let's come in with our adult ego state. The problem is the problem. Doesn't matter who's to blame. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have things to learn from it, but you can move forward faster and come to resolution faster. So empathy is a great secondary, but ownership right now, where things stand, certainly trumps that.
What meditation technique would help us get back into that course correction?
I personally am a big fan of the loving kindness meditation. So have you heard of this one?
I have not.
It's big in the world, the Buddhist world, but I don't want that to scare anybody off if they hear sort of religious undertones and they're like, forget that, I'm out of here. But it is a form of visualization technique and meditation. It's one where you can literally visualize someone you're having a hard time with or a difficult time with and send them love. Now,
I like it.
Okay, let me tell you how powerful this is. One of the things that I do when I'm prepping before I do a big talk or I do training or any of that is literally sending love, just sitting, eyes closed, send love to the audience and love to the people I'm going to show up when. I know that sounds crazy, I am sure, but I will tell you the difference in energy, the difference in experience is really powerful. Love is sort of like pretty much the best emotion and the best, it's sort of like a superpower. So the more we can give that out to the world, it's really powerful. Now, the whole job of a Buddhist monk, let's just talk about those guys for a quick second, is that they stay in a state of mindfulness or meditation or prayer in order to heal the world. Now, that's like the job is just to make sure that they're sort of giving that out to give love to the world and help, heal the world. And they've gone into dangerous neighborhoods or places where they've been problematic and done meditation for an extensive period of time. And they've been able to come back and look at the results of violence and see how it has decreased simply by staying in a state of love for long periods of time. It's pretty interesting.
That is crazy.
Energy is contagious. I will tell you that. And if you don't believe this, if you've ever been around someone who's having a bad day and it put a damper on your day, it is because their energy is contagious. It's more contagious than the common cold. I am telling you, be responsible for the energy that you are bringing into the room. So a loving kindness meditation, quite simply, is envisioning someone you're having a difficult time with and sending them love anyways. And it really does help increase the empathy and increase, your ability to course correct and get back on a good path of communication. Because otherwise what ends up happening and we talked about priming in one of our episodes, is that our brain is primed to see only their behavior as bad.
Yes.
And if we're frustrated with someone, every interaction we have with them, the brain will say, oh, did you see that? Oh, that just proves to me that they're an idiot or they're a jerk or, whatever it is that we're trying to prove to ourselves. So in order to stop that cycle, practicing a loving kindness meditation helps show the brain that it can be different, and it can help prime the brain to see the good.
That is incredible.
It's fun too. Okay.
I'm really excited.
Okay, you want to do a quick one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So for this one, if you're driving, again, please pull over, hit pause, come back and listen to this part of the episode at some other time, because we don't want anybody driving with your eyes closed. And I don't care how fancy your car is. If it's a self-driver, we still want you all to be safe. So get into a comfortable position. Just somewhere where you're not laying down, your back supported, your head is free. Go ahead and close your eyes and take a few deep breaths in and out, leaving your hands wherever they feel comfortable. And I want you to imagine someone that you love or care about deeply standing in front of you. You don't have to think too hard about who it is. Whoever pops in your brain first is definitely the one you're meant to be thinking of. And I want you to imagine that you are sending them this bright white light from your heart to theirs. I just want you to see it sort of radiating, this bright, sparkling light, just overtaking them, and send them as much love as you possibly can. And take a look at their eyes. See their eyes if you can. See if you can see them experiencing the love that you're sending them. Do their eyes change? Do they light up a little bit? Now, I want you to imagine someone that is just an acquaintance, somebody that maybe you don't know really well, but you've had an experience or interaction with from time to time. It could be a colleague, could be somebody you hang out with socially from time to time. Picture them in front of you and send them that same love. See it radiating from your heart, and engulfing them with the white light. See them smile back at you with gratitude. And I want you to consider somebody that you're having a tough time with. This could be somebody you work with. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's a former friend. Someone that just every time you're around each other, it just doesn't seem to go right. I want you to send them the same love. As much as you can, radiate that love to them. See them pouring in white, bright light. See their face and eyes light up with gratitude, sending love back to you. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. It's a very quick, brief version of loving kindness. There's also somewhere you can choose to send love to your neighborhood, your whole house. You can really radiate it across the entire world if you want. Sometimes I've done these meditations in big groups where you'll see the room almost appear to get lighter when your eyes are closed. It's sort of an interesting shift. And maybe it's just, who knows, your brain thinks that it's happening, or maybe it really is happening. But yeah, it can be kind of a good stress relieving way to get back on track with a relationship or with communication. What did you think, Jen?
I loved it. I feel like, the person that I envisioned, I will probably try a little bit harder with. Maybe have a little more empathy.
And do it over and over again. I think it's the repetition of send them love, send them love, send them love. And it starts to prime your brain in a different way. And then magic ensues.
And we're going to leave this episode right there with the magic ensuing. Thank you so much for listening. We want to continue this conversation. Let us know what you got out of the episode, if you had any big epiphanies. Connect with us on LinkedIn. I'm out there at Jen Edds, EDDS. You can find Amy at Amy Woodall. Send us a message, share the episode, and tag us in your post, or really Share the message, tag us in your post, let us know what you got out of it. But most importantly, if you know someone that could benefit from practicing this loving kindness meditation, feel free to share this episode with them. It's really easy to do. You can share links from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcasting apps of choice. Make it really simple. Thanks for listening. Now get out in the world and do some good.